Well, good morning. Good morning. If I could have everyone's attention, please, we'll go ahead and start the Income Tax Subcommittee of the Ways and Means Committee. I'd like to call on Representative Corbett, if you'll open us with an invocation, please. What's your mic number?
Bow with us, please. Lord, again, we just want to thank you for this day, Lord. Just thank you for the many blessings you bestow upon us each and every day, Lord. We just ask that you just lead, guide, and direct us today, Lord, and everything that we do and say will be pleasing in thy sight, Lord. We just want to ask that you just watch over our families while we're away from home, Lord, and just give everybody travel mercies home when they leave here today. Lord, just pray now, just forgive us where we fail and all things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Representative Corbett. First bill we have for us today is House Bill 283. Chairman Camp, if you'd like to explain the measure, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. This is House Bill 283, LC number 432768S. It is a sub. It's an interesting bill because it truly is about affordable housing. The first part of the bill talks about an income tax credit for first-time home buyers who are purchasing a home up to $250,000. They're eligible for a tax credit up to 1.2% of the price of the house. This does have a sunset on June 30th, 2024. Second part of the bill refers to mobile homes. Right now in Georgia, you're being taxed. If you buy a new mobile home, you're being taxed at 100% of the sales price of the home. A stick-built home is taxed on the materials only. This brings some level of parity, so a person buying a mobile home is no longer having to pay tax on the labor at the end of it. This ultimately will save them a good bit of money and hopefully put more people in housing, either the first part of the bill with new home purchases or the second part with purchasing new mobile homes. I'm open for any questions.
Any members of the committee have any questions for the author of the bill? Recognize number 24. Who's at 24? Representative Fry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate this piece of legislation. I think this is one of the things that we really need to be focusing on as a state.
Do you have a question for the author?
Yes, I do.
Well, this is question and answer time, please.
I'll get right to it, sir. So my question is, on the single-family tax credit, is 3 years exactly a good definition of a first-time home buyer? Not having owned a home in 3 years. In our transitional society, I think 3 years is a little short, and would put forth that might need to be put out a little bit to 5 or 10 years. That's my question. Isn't it true?
Chairman Blackman.
Yeah, just to answer that is the definition used by DCA.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions for the author of the bill?
Mr. Chairman, sorry, there was a question about if part one was mobile homes and part two was also mobile homes. My understanding is part one is single-family resident stick-built homes, is my understanding, and part two is mobile homes. That way this bill encompasses both, so have a decision and we're assisting either way.
Do we have any other questions for the author of the bill? If not, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Make a motion to pass out with the do pass recommendation.
Got a do pass. Got a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Sorry. All right. Next, we're going to have House Bill 454, Chairman Blackman.
Yay.
Is it 21 or 22? Okay.
Yeah, I would Actually, the Georgia manufacturers, I know, brought this bill initially, and I see Jonathan sitting there, and he did such a great job yesterday afternoon of explaining their portion of the bill. Would you mind doing that again, Jonathan, just to discuss how some of that can be taken in, how it is affected by the federal statute?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Jonathan Feldman. I went to law firm Evershed Sutherland. I'm here on behalf of the Georgia Manufacturing Association. I went through this yesterday, so I'll try to be brief. It's somewhat of a supplemental IRC conformity bill. House Bill 95 has already passed out, which was a simple conformity bill. This adds one additional item to how Georgia's conforming to the IRC code. This relates to Section 174 of the IRC, which deals with whether taxpayers can deduct or capitalize and amortize R&D expenses. Historically, taxpayers, businesses have had the option to either deduct their R&D expenses or to capitalize and amortize those. When Congress passed the TCJA in 2017, most of the provisions took effect either immediately or 2018. But there was a provision in there relating to 174. It didn't take effect until 2022. And the provision taking effect in 2022, the change to 174, says that businesses can no longer deduct their R&D expenses. They have to capitalize and amortize them, domestic ones for 5 years, foreign ones for 15 years. But if you remember in the TCJA at the federal level, while it was broadening the tax base, and this would be considered a broadening of the tax base, it also significantly lowered the tax rate. When Georgia originally conformed with the TCJA, it decoupled from a lot of provisions, and Georgia also did not significantly reduce the tax rate. So beginning in 2022, to the extent that 174 takes effect at the federal level, because it would serve as a tax increase to Georgia taxpayers, because those taxpayers that were previously able to deduct their R&D expenses, they would be required to capitalize and amortize them over 5 or 15 years. So what House Bill 454 does is it would decouple from this one provision of the IRC and allow taxpayers to continue to elect to deduct or capitalize them as they've done in the past. And other states have specifically decoupled from this provision. Our neighbor to the north, Tennessee, has done it. Wisconsin has done it. And there's other states that haven't conformed with the TCJA at all.
We got a question for you, please.
Yes, sir. It's early in the morning. I was moving kind of slow. I was wondering if the gentleman could repeat all that again for us. I'm just kidding.
You're
Mr.
out of
Chairman.
order, Chairman Martin. So, do we have any questions for Mr. Felden? Hearing none, we'll just thank you for the testimony. As I understand it, and you so ably described yesterday. And by the way, thank you for your amazing expertise in all Title 48. You're very valuable when it comes to educating this committee on exactly what the code is and helping us explain to us as a committee some of the consequences when we do change Georgia code relating to income taxes. But again, do we have any other questions? So, well, we have one more section of the bill that probably needs a little bit of, two more sections that Chairman Blackman needs to explain to us.
The newest section is from House Bill 626, and I know Chairman, you have are the author of that particular piece. If you wanted to run through that, since we haven't seen that section before, it is a rather simple ad, but thought you might explain that for us if you would.
Happy to do that. Section 6, beginning on line 182, in the measure is adding an additional condition for the language of force majeure, which simply is used descriptively as unforeseen circumstances when it relates to the ability for any of our industries that are in a position to receive income tax credits for the job creation that they do. And for example, if you look at line 186, force majeure might includes explosions, implosions, fires. B is line 187 is unusual and unforeseeable weather, floods, torrential hail, tornadoes, and think of devastating tornadoes that came through Noonan. If we had through our tax policy had a large business that was growing jobs, that was otherwise eligible for job tax credits, and tornado came through and wiped them out, that has zero to do with their ability to train and hire people. So it goes through these conditions. It's been in Georgia code for a while, but what we do beginning in line 195 is add another condition, which would be a pandemic, which is an outbreak of a disease that occurs over a wide geographic area. And obviously we just went through a better part of 3 years of a pandemic. So this would add language to the force majeure language that would basically extend the runway for any job creators in Georgia to be eligible for the job tax credits for which they had been striving and we had been expecting as a state. I will recognize whomever is at microphone 19.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Isn't it true that nobody in this country could have foreseen a pandemic coming, even more than a tornado or a hurricane, that you can pretty much get over in a few days, and this pandemic lasted about 2 years. So whenever we put time limits on these folks, totally out of their control, this bill with this provision would actually help these folks come back on something that they have control over by giving them the time they need.
As the author of this section of the bill, I would say that's well stated. Thank you, Chairman Stevens. So are there any questions for this section of the bill or any other section of the bill from the members of the committee? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? I'm sorry. Chairman Blackman, do you have?
There was a lot, we presented it yesterday, and I know there was a lot of, I just wanted to make sure that the other portions of the bill that, a lot of wordsmithing, on the tax portions of this, and I think the copy that I have in my book here is the wrong one, but if we do have LC 432769S, is that correct?
That's the measure
Mr.
that
Chairman?
I was explaining.
Okay, yeah. So it just includes a lot of wordsmith, but we do make some adjustments to clean up a little bit of the language and how we handle the itemization versus the standard deduction. It really is largely a cleanup of last year's bill and fixes a couple of things that we offset with a credit for the itemizers. Keeps everybody whole, everybody gets a tax cut, and it allows our married families to go ahead and exempt $30,000 for a family of 4 entirely from their income tax starting in year 1. So just wanted to mention that's the other piece of that 454.
Thank you, Chairman Blackman. Again, are there any other questions from members of the committee? Again, hearing no questions, what's the pleasure of the committee? Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Chairman Blackman. And that ends the income tax subcommittee portion of this, so I'll turn it over to, what's the next committee meeting?
It's Advil Horn.
Advil Horn.
We'll call the ad valorem tax subcommittee hearing to order, and the first bill that we're going to hear will be HB 322. Representative Scott. Oh,
Yes, she has already presented this bill. We have seen it multiple times before. I know that our former chairman, Harold, was quite a advocate of this particular piece of legislation. So she said she needed to work today, and I told her that I would speak for the bill. And if it's the will of the subcommittee that to pass it, we would, let her know.
Mr. Chairman. Any questions from the committee on this? Before that, as I recall, this was a bill that was, as the chairman said, that had been put up multiple times in regards to ad valorem property tax, but specifically fees that were added on to the property tax bill. I think it was a good measure then, good measure now. So at this time, Chairman we've got a motion?
No, I have a question.
Question 18.
In the past, when we've talked about this, the cities and counties have come forward and said that, they couldn't collect those fees with the same level of good payment for like garbage fees in particular.
Mhm.
And they presented that there had been no foreclosures for the fees not being paid. Do we have that information? Have people been foreclosed on or lost their homes because of not paying the fees?
I don't.
I was just curious how many people had lost their houses because of not
Right,
paying the fees.
Okay, the chair does not know specifically that information. Is there anybody?
That's the basis of the
out?
bill.
28, Representative Ridley.
I can tell you, I remember when this bill came up a couple of years ago, the reason it came up, I don't think anybody lost it. I think when they went to pay what they owed on the property, they had like thousands and thousands of dollars worth of fees on there. So they had the money to pay the taxes, but all the fees on there was more than what the actual taxes was that was owed. And so it kept it tied up, and they ended up having to get an attorney and that kind of stuff. And if I remember right, that's where all this started at. And there were several cities that was doing it.
You're correct. Representative Stevens.
And just to further to answer the lady's question, there was a question regarding if the fees and the taxes were on the same bill, whether the posting of those were going to be potentially a problem if somebody split up the fees and the taxes and then you posted some to the fee and some to the tax. You could potentially lose your home at the courthouse door because it was a posting error. This would fix that.
I do recall that. You're correct, Mr. Chairman. Representative Martin. Chairman Martin.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to echo what Chairman said. That's my recollection is if you had a $1,000 tax bill and you had $200 in trash fees and you sent $1,000, if they posted the trash fees were older than the tax bill and they posted $200 there, you would have $200 in taxes unpaid, and that would in fact get you a FIFAD. So I believe the gentleman is absolutely right on that.
I think you are correct. 23, Washburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also would suggest that everything that's been, all the comments, that also would create a cloud on the title if the individual's trying to sell that property as well. So I think it is a problem that needs to be addressed.
Yep. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
I do believe that the counties have admitted that there are people that have lost their homes because they didn't pay their trash fee.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep, and I'll add one more comment before we'll do a motion. We also know that in the past, some of these tax bills, because they were not delineated or people didn't know, there were actually deductions for ad valorem taxes that included fees. So at some point, I remember the conversation with DOR that there was a potential several $1,000,000 that had been deducted for state income tax purposes that were in there. So this, I believe this is, this will help remedy any error in that regard. So with that, the chairman will entertain a motion. Got a motion and a second. Hold on. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, like sign. And the bill passes.
We're just gonna have to postpone. I don't see the author of the bill here for 347.
We don't see the author for House Bill 347. It's not here, so we will postpone hearing that bill. With that, the ad valorem tax subcommittee is adjourned.
All right, if we'll begin to settle in, we'll go ahead and call this Sales Tax Subcommittee of the House Ways and Means Committee to order. We have one item on the agenda this morning. We have HB 170 LC 43 2745S. Who's the original author? Chairman Carpenter, are you ready to tell us about your proposition? Ready as I'll ever be, sir. Yes, sir. I can only wait. I can only.
Let me hit it again.
No, you're good.
Live?
You're live.
Live and in color. All right. Good morning, everybody. Appreciate you being here this morning. Been a lot of reiterations of this. Where we basically settled on digital downloads is when you download lines 27 through, keep going, to 43. Basically gives the list of all the items, and it's basically when you have permanent ownership of an item. So it's not taxing anything subscription based at this time. It is literally if you buy a book on your phone and you own that book on your phone, then you're going to pay sales tax on it. If it's a subscription service to read books, it is not taxed at this time. I do think in the future we need to look at that because the code, we're updating the code, but the code's about to be updated because everything's moving to subscription. But we wanted to make sure that it was important that our brick and mortar stores that sell video games, that sell books, that are taxed in our community are facing a parity in the taxation system across the internet as well. So without any, I'll take any questions if you have any.
I'm going to recognize the chairman of the committee, Chairman Blackman. I think he wanted to add something, then we'll take questions from the
I
subcommittee.
just wanted to thank the author. I mean, I know this has been an evolutionary type thing, and it's been parsed down into a very small number here, but it's really a true digital facilitator and piggybacks on the modernization of our tax code and what we've done, I think, over the last few years to capture tax on things that traditionally have had sales tax associated with it. Is that not true?
Yep, that is correct, sir.
Thank you.
I do have one question.
Yes, sir.
From a perspective of a situs of the sales tax, if I'm downloading something on my phone, the sales tax is going to accrue to what jurisdiction? The jurisdiction that I was in when I actually downloaded, or the jurisdiction where the phone's registered?
That's a very excellent question. I would actually have to ask somebody else that question. I have no idea where the jurisdictional tax would go. I mean, I have a feeling. I have a feeling. I mean, it's easier with Amazon, right? Because you know where you're shipping the item, and you just use the address of the shipping location. I think the phone piece is going to be. It won't be perfect. Is what I would suggest that.
Fair enough. I mean, we're in subcommittee now. We'll get that answer as we transition to full committee.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should have that answer. I will know that they will be remitted to the Department of Revenue, and hopefully with some indication of where that should go.
Thank you. Number 19, Chairman Stevens.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wouldn't you agree that this bill does nothing more than level the playing field for one form versus another of essentially the same product?
That's correct, and that was the point. We're realizing we're subsidizing internet sales versus brick and mortar sales.
Thank you.
Chairman Knight, I thought your light was on, then it went off, so I didn't know if you were with us. You're with us. Well,
13.
Maybe you're not meant to speak this morning, Mr. Chairman Knight.
No, I want to echo what's been said. This committee over the last couple of years is trying to look at parity. And we look at the state of Georgia and all over our state and our communities. We're seeing traditional brick and mortar, businesses, suffer because of this internet, the unequal playing field that internet sales have caused, and that's a detriment to our communities as we look to good people, jobs locally, taxes, property taxes, and just good neighbors that support our communities, traditional businesses. So I want to thank the author for that and his continued pursuit of this bill.
Thanks, Chairman Knight. Chairman Corbett, you have a question for the author?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just more of a comment. I think this I'd like to thank you for the bill, but this, I think, continues on what Chairman Powell started years ago, and this just continues what he started, and at the proper time, I'd like to make a motion.
Any further questions? Gentleman's recognized for that purpose. I have a motion and a second. We do pass on House Bill 170, LC 432745S. Is there a discussion? Discussion on the motion? Motion is due pass on House Bill 170. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Motion moves on to full committee. That is all we had. That is all we had before the. I'm sorry.
No, yeah. Sorry, that's it.
You don't have your notes. It's not loaded.
We can.
We have no further items. We have no further items for the Sales Tax Committee, and if there's no objection, we'll stand adjourned. I see none. We are adjourned.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and call the Public Finance and Policy Committee to order. And we're going to start with House Bill 461. Representative Thomas, you're up.
Is this on? There
Yes,
we go.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. HB 461 does a few things to help lower the cost of regulatory fees. The main part of the bill would eliminate one of 6 methods jurisdictions can use to calculate regulatory fees, and it modifies one other. It cleans up language regarding professions and occupations that are regulated locally. It just does that by clearing up what is already in the current code, that those professions are regulated by the state and the federal government. Finally, a similar version of this passed the House last year, and this version is a compromising language that was developed by all the interested parties. So by that, I'll take some questions. I think we have a couple of people that like to testify in support of the bill.
Questions of committee? Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
I think most of the questions probably get answered by testimony, but we started in a little different place, did we not, with this originally out of the House last year?
That's correct.
Or
yes.
2 years ago, I think, maybe even. A little more simplified version of the bill, but it's intended essentially to take the regulatory fee and it applies strictly to whatever product they may be reviewing or whatever the regulation may entail, and nothing beyond that at the local level. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Les Snyder, why don't you come on up to the microphone? You don't have to move. Brad?
Okay.
461.
Is that? Oh, I'm sorry. That's the wrong one that we've got. No wonder. 461, Les Snyder. Stay there.
Members of the committee, my name is Les Schneider with Wimberly and Lawson, and I was involved a lot in the study committee that eventually produced the occupational tax bill. And again, the key things here is that the cost of regulation is what should drive what the local governments charge for their regulatory fee. And the best example I can give you is that it should not be the cost of the project. The easiest example I can give you is if I have the same roof put on my house that Representative Stevens has on his house, but his costs $15,000 and my cost $10,000, the inspection for that roof by the local government should be the same. The price of the project has nothing to do with it, and that's the fix that you see on page 5. If you look at lines 110 to 117, what we're indicating is that for construction, we are basically saying that whether it's new construction or extensive renovation, if the extensive renovation is in excess of $75,000, although the local governments like to use the International Code Council and figure out how they do, that Code Council does use price. So all we're doing is limiting what the county can charge by items 1 through 4, right above it. So this will get rid of the fact that that some local governments would basically take the cost of the project and multiply it by a percentage, and that would be the regulatory fee, which would be way in excess of the regulation. So I think this is a good compromise. I know I've talked to people at ACCG and GMA. They're neutral on this. They understand that they don't want to overcharge anyone for regulatory fees. The other small changes that you see on page 2, basically there is saying that the cost of the regulatory activity has to be used to run the department. It doesn't have to be kept in a separate account, but you cannot use it as a profit maker. The other items that are crossed out on that page, taxi and limos, shooting galleries, firearm dealers, all of those have had subsequent case law that indicates that the locals no longer issue a regulatory fee. It's either done by the state or the federal government. The same thing with the boxing on line 50. Again, boxing is regulated by the Georgia Athletic and Entertainment Commission, and they have sole jurisdiction on it. As I understand it, on line 76, we're adding registered investment advisors because, again, they are regulated by other agencies other than local governments. Same thing with the shooting range and the firearm dealers on 91 and 93. Again, I think this is something that's needed. A lot of local governments inadvertently charge people way in excess of what it costs to do the regulation, and I would certainly encourage all of you to pass the bill, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of committee, Chairman Martin?
Real brief question. This, to the author of the bill, this doesn't prohibit a local government from right-sizing the inspection. If it's a big, if it's a bigger building, it actually takes longer for the inspector to do it. They still have the ability to do that. They just don't do it. If it's a big building that costs 10 times as much as another big building, they can't. They wouldn't charge them 10 times as much, but they'd charge them more than they would a building that was a tenth that size, or charge them. Yes, it's based on the time it takes to do the regulatory work, not the cost of the person. Thank you.
That's right.
Scott, are you number 1?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask about the study listed on line 123. Is that a simple math problem, or is there subjectivity attached to that?
I'm sorry, you said on line 123 of the bill?
Right.
What we're crossing?
It says my understanding is if the business owner challenges it, then the local government shall undertake a study of such fee, and if the local government determines that the fee imposed, et cetera.
What LC number are you working on?
Oh shoot, am I on the wrong one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm going to apologize. I should have read the LC number off. It's 432757S. Yeah, 461. Everybody got it last night, the sub. Yeah. Hey, why don't you give me that piece of paper?
Just a reminder, this is the first hearing as we're getting clarification here.
Yeah, it's LC number 432757S. Yeah, it's been removed.
It had been removed.
Yeah, so. Sorry, I didn't mean to scratch my head. I should. If that was my fault, I should have read the LC number off.
The old ones on the machines.
LC 432757S. Yep. Yeah, see, you've got the old version. You don't have the sub. So, I know it got emailed out last night. That's the only thing I know. So,
Let's suspend just a moment.
that was special for you.
You're already in there, Patty, and you wouldn't.
Yeah. I tried to pay some homage to you on the floor the other day on Engineers Day. You know that, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, refresh your tablet, if you will, and you'll see the LC 432557S pop up on your tablet. And it's just a little slow this morning, like some of it.
I do have a question, Mr. Chairman, off this new one. It looks like we're adding registered investment advisors. Do local governments actually regulate registered investment advisors? I thought that was just the Securities Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission. So I didn't know any local governments regulated registered investment advisors.
As I understand that, and this is going by just some of my experience, there has been an attempt by some local governments to do that, but not the vast majority. And I think by putting this in here, it basically removes all doubt that they should not be registered by the local government, because local government really doesn't have any oversight over those people. And the whole purpose of this section was to make sure that local governments would not impose fees on lawyers, doctors, dentists, et cetera, because they're already being regulated either by the state or the federal government. So
Okay.
I think it is a good addition.
Got it. Thank you.
Representative Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, I appreciate all of your extensive knowledge in the tax arena, and I just have a question about lines 22 through 25. Specifically, when we built a neighborhood, installed a sewer system that the city required, it's streets, sidewalks, trees, the whole 9 yards. Then we let the lot sit for a little bit, and then we went back and did infill on that sewer system. When we paid a plumber to hook up a 4-inch line to the sewer system that we had already paid for, we were charged $3,000 for that as a fee. Do lines 22 through 25 address that specific instance that we're faced with when you have to send an inspector out to look at a ditch and offer the idea that the 4-inch connection looks like it's connected, and get in their truck and leave and charge $3,000? Would that change?
I believe that's a tap fee, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a twofold answer to your question. First, the whole purpose of putting that section in, and if you read it consistently, what's on page 5 through lines 100 through 109, we are trying to tie it to the hourly rate of those folks, a flat fee or things like that. But in your example, what you're really saying is it can't possibly cost $3,000 to have somebody drive out and check to see that something is coupled. So we wanted to do more to the cost of regulation. So that was put in there for greater emphasis. That's correct. Now, the whole issue of development fees and things like that is dealt with in a separate section of the law. But that is more of a negotiation between the developer and the local government as to what they're going to provide in addition for that neighborhood on zoning issues and things like that. But yes, those lines were done to further emphasize that you're not supposed to exceed the cost of regulation.
Thank you for all your work on this stuff.
Representative Washburn.
I'm sorry, I'm not on the.
Okay. Who's next? Representative Martin. cleared that up. We're just going right along here. Representative Carpenter.
It's actually my dear neighbor to the left there.
Wow, okay.
We're sharing.
Come back again. There we go.
There we go, there we go, there we go. Line 29, that's just building and construction contractors. And then you go down to the explanation of extensive renovation, 75,000 or more is the definition. Does this allow, if there's a 4,000 square foot building that needs 300,000 in renovations or 600,000, can they do it by the price of the renovation under this 115 through 117, or
No,
is it a flat amount above that?
That's what we're trying to stop. That
Okay.
that they would look at the 300,000 or 600,000 and multiply that by a percentage and say that's your regulatory fee. That would really not be reflective of
the
the
work
cost
required.
of regulation. And you are limited by the items from 100 to lines 100 to 109, so that you have to use either a flat fee, an hourly rate, but with benefits.
So the
except-
hourly rate could involve more complexity in, say, a medical office than a warehouse, but it
right.
can't just be based on the price
price.
is 2 or 3 times as much, so the fee is 2 or 3 times as much.
That's the
Thank you.
evil that we're trying to get away from, yes.
Seeing no more questions, we will call the first hearing to an end, and we'll let you get on to your next bill.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we're moving on to
House Bill 223, Chairman Stevens.
as we're, all of our equipment's falling apart up here. House Bill 223. Some of you might recognize this language. It's been in the budget the past couple of years, and this bill basically does one thing. It's the same as Senate Bill 127, which is moving in the Senate. It enhances the oversight of a taxing mechanism created by the state for local governments, specifically for destination marketing organizations. This prevents local governments from altering an agreement with a destination marketing organization or changing that marketing organization without the approval of this review board that's already in place with the Department of Community Affairs. This is the Performance Review Board. We've had instances in the past where there's been the potential for some shenanigans, and let me put this on. Maybe that'll help a little bit. And then this will prevent that. It is, again, worth noting the language has been in the budget. We've got several people, Mr. Chairman, that like to explain a little bit further what this bill would do. And it is strictly an oversight, and it will require that anytime you change, and you guys can come on up, Mark and others, that you go before this Performance Review Board.
If you'll just tell us who you are and who you represent.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Lee Hughes. I'm representing the Georgia Association of Convention and Visitors Bureaus and the Tourism Leadership Council.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Chris Hardman, and I'm with the Georgia Hotel and Lodging Association.
I don't know what I can say to add to what Chairman Stevens so eloquently articulated earlier, except that this is something that the CVB world would like to see pass. There has been some cases of abuse of the use of these funds, lodging taxes, in some communities in the state, and this has been, as Chairman Stevens said, in the language in the budget in past years as a deterrent for communities misusing those funds. We think this is legislation that would continue to be a deterrent to that kind of misuse.
To that note, Mr. Chairman, I would also echo that this bill simply clarifies those responsibilities of the Hotel Motel Tax Performance Review Board under the Department of Community Affairs, as the chairman alluded to. In addition, that board is made up by 11 different members, with representatives from every impacted party, including a city, a county, a hotelier, and a CVB. GMA and ACCG are both neutral on this bill, and we did work with GMA to help shape this language. So thank you. I would ask for your favorable support.
I don't see any questions. Chairman Parsons.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you all. I'm just trying to get it clear in my head. This is supposed to be our off day, and I'm still not reconciled to the fact that we're here sitting here.
My head's not that clear either, if it helps at all,
Yeah.
Chairman.
So these funds are supposed to be used for something in
It ain't
particular,
clear either.
which is in code, I guess, is what you're saying. But this is clarifying that, or is it setting up some kind of penalties if they don't use it correctly? The local governments.
Yes, sir. It's a very complex section of the code that has been amended many times over the years, and it actually depends on when your community started collecting lodging taxes as to which part of the code section applies to you, whether or not you were grandfathered in the old section. I can make it much more complicated because it's a very complicated section. I think the best way to look at this, Mr. Chairman, if I can respectfully suggest this is an existing overview board in the Department of Community Affairs that has oversight in cases of misuse of funds, and this legislation enhances that oversight to extend it to the agreements between communities and their destination marketing organizations, including if they wanted to change to a different destination marketing organization. I think it's good for us to all remember if the city of Macon is trying to bring in an event, they work for years ahead of time, because those events will sometimes book the Macon Civic Center as an example, or the Macon Convention Center as an example, sometimes 5 and 6 and 7 years ahead of time. So if you had a turnover in a city government or a county government, and they wanted to change that DMO at the snap of a finger because of, for whatever reason, good or bad, they need to be careful and cautious about that. This legislation does not apply if the DMO and the local governing authority agree to any changes. It doesn't apply. This is only if there's a disagreement and they go in front of that existing board, the Performance Review Board, as an arbiter of that disagreement.
Well, may I ask another question?
Please.
So I'm here again, I'm just trying to clarify my mindset. Are you talking about they misuse funds that's in violation of the contract, or they misuse funds in violation of code? Where is it written that these violations occur? I mean, where are the violations, where do they come to? That's all I'm trying to figure out.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question. I think this bill only has to do with, as Lee alluded to, the agreement between the local government and the Convention and Visitors Bureau, not necessarily the funds. The Performance Review Board is already created to take up complaints of the misuse of those funds. I think the best example to give is the hotel motel tax really has 3 buckets, depending on what section of the code you're in. In the first bucket, that would go to the general fund of the local government. The second budget, which would be the TCT funds, and those funds would go to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, or the Destination Marketing Organization, for the sole purpose of marketing that destination, putting heads in beds, butts in seats, fans and stands, to bring economic growth to that area. And then there's the third bucket, which is the tourism product development bucket, to really build out those civic centers, as you alluded to, in Macon. So I think that part's already taken care of under the Performance Review Board. But when there is a disagreement between the local government and the Convention and Visitors Bureau, we need to ensure that those funds are still going to be going to that CVB for the purpose of marketing, according to code.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I'm going to recognize the author of the bill. I think he had an answer for that.
Let me see if I can clear this up real quick. Let's just, for example, say that the chairman to my left here, we may have a new elected city, county government coming in, and they're real good friends with the chairman to my left. Now, if that chairman to my left happened to want to make a destination marketing organization under his name, There's nothing today that prevents him from going to the city and creating the new marketing organization that he would then control. Ladies and gentlemen, that will get you into federal prison because this bill will prevent and deter that from happening. Probably the easiest example I can think of, and that has happened in the past.
Okay, Representative Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your presentation. I'd like to talk with you offline on some other issues. But I was just trying to, when you gave the example of Macon, I was just trying to figure how this will really impact my area of the state, which is very rural. And I don't think, the more I listen, I don't think it's really going to have much of an impact on my area because most counties in my district just have Chamber of Commerce. I don't think we have any that has a convention and visitors bureau.
Yes, ma'am. So first of all, I made up that example of Macon off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So secondly, there is a threshold in here of it only applies in the case of a community that's collected $500,000 in lodging taxes in a given year.
Yeah.
So for a smaller community, that's not likely to apply.
Yeah, that's what I figured more I kept listening. So thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
All right, thanks, Representative Bentley. Mr. Chairman Martin.
Mr. Chairman, I think Chairman Stevens brought the example that unfortunately I think we've seen occur in the state, and I just wanted somebody to say it out loud that is the problem. We are helping people not to get in trouble.
Very good. Thank you, Chairman Martin.
Well put.
Anybody else? Any other last comment? Mr. Chairman, you got a last comment you'd like to make?
This has the potential to keep a lot of folks out of trouble that through unintended, that may not have intended to get there or even realize that they're creating themselves a problem.
Okay. One more time, Representative Bentley.
Just one last comment while we're talking about conventions. The Georgia Strawberry Festival will be held April 22nd, so I love to see all of you down in Taylor County that day.
Thank you, Representative Bentley. All right. All right, hey, Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing the bill at the proper time. I'd like to make a motion if we're through with testimony.
All right. Your proper time's now.
I make a motion to pass.
You got a motion to pass? Got a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, same sign. So carried. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Point taken. Might want to refresh your tablet just to make sure that you got the most recent version of House Bill 101. We're going to suspend just a minute. Click Crow. This is the last one.
No, we got one.
You know what? To save a matter of time, for those of you that can see on your calendar, House Bill 449. Where's Representative Knight? Is he here? Ah, there you are. What number are you, sir?
Is it working?
14.
Yeah, it is working.
You're on.
All right. Thank you. Members of the committee, we heard this the other day. This bill seeks to eliminate a special treatment up under CUVA.
Well, excuse me, one more time. We're on 449?
Yes, House Bill 449. What this bill does is it seeks parity within our CUVA code. As many know, CUVA has been around for a long time, and what it does is it seeks to let the conservation uses such as timber, farmland, wetlands, natural landscape, those things that are listed up under the CUVA as allowed, authorized CUVA uses. It allows people to apply for a CUVA exemption and enter into a CUVA covenant for 10 years, okay? And what happens is under, with the exception of what this bill seeks to do, any landowner who breaks any part of that covenant, if you had 1,000 acres, you sold 50 acres for commercial development or any other development, it then breaks the entire covenant. And thus, then that landowner is responsible for the difference between the taxes paid under the CUVA valuation and what would be an ordinary valuation. That would be twice that amount plus interest, okay? This General Assembly put in an exception in 2016 or 17 that gave special treatment for solar farms, or solar installations, I shouldn't say farms. That is not a CUVA, underlying CUVA authorized conservation use of the land. So what is happening now is that same landowner can then split off a portion of that land and only be responsible for the taxes and the penalties for that portion of the land that is split off, and then is thus allowed to retain the remaining land in the covenant. This bill is about parity, in which we treat all CUVA applicants the same. And that's all this bill does. This is, I want to make a statement, this is not against solar, but this is to preserve the integrity of the covenant that landowners enter into when they apply for CUVA. And that is simply what this bill does. If you look at the bill, it's short, it simply undoes the legislation that gave the special treatment. And we're putting everyone back in parity under CUVA. And that's simple. That's the bill.
So this reverts back to its original intent.
Yeah, giving parity to all landowners, such that it stands fair. And if you get out of the covenant, then everyone is to pay the same penalty and be treated in the same manner. And that's what this Ways and Means Committee has always done, is trying to look for parity in the application of our tax laws that come out of this committee and out of the Georgia General Assembly, is to look to parity and make sure that we're treating everyone the same under the law.
Gentleman from Lake Blackshear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one question. I assume if this passes, this will be going forward, and this won't be retro to anything that has happened in the past.
That is my understanding, having talked to Leg Council, is that obviously this committee doesn't like to do retroactive legislation. That's not what, as a policy, nor is, I don't think, constitutional that we like to do. So yes, according to Leg Council, when we drew the bill, this is not retroactive.
Thank you.
Chairman Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask, you had mentioned in your presentation that the General Assembly some time ago had passed legislation in favor or to help the solar installations. I mean, is this what we're deleting here? Is that what you're referring to? I don't recollect us doing anything, so this must be what you're referring to.
Yes,
right?
we did this, I think it was in 16 or 17, if I'm not mistaken. And we have up under the code, exceptions. You've heard somebody, a farmer, whatever, has got a barn and does a wedding. That was an exception.
Yeah.
Those are things that, we have these exceptions there that are, I say, de minimis or immaterial. It doesn't change the underlying conservation use for which the landowner applied and was accepted and entered into the covenant. And this was put in, and I don't think this General Assembly, I don't think this committee realized that You know, this was not about putting solar panels on top of, a barn or out in 20 acres that used to be the pig pen. Now we're seeing all over Georgia hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of acres that are in total solar panels, and that is not a conservation use that is up under the code. Yeah. And so that's why we want to make sure that we're doing parity. This does nothing to say that a landowner cannot sell or do that and choose to convert to solar panels. It's just we want to keep the integrity of the CUVA legislation there and treat all the same.
Right. If I may, I don't have any problem with what you're saying in respect to this bill that you have. I just couldn't. I've different times people have mentioned a tax credit or a tax break we have for solar, and I never have been able to. This is the only one I can actually even think of that was put in related to the CUVA.
Well, this is not necessarily a tax break for the CUVA. This is an exception that lets somebody get out of a covenant without penalty, or at least penalty on the for breaking the covenant, only on the portion that was put in, in solar.
I was just trying to confirm that the tax break, or whatever you want to call it, for solar. The one you're related to, the one that you spoke of, this actually does away with that. I understand the reason you're saying. I don't disagree with you. I just want to make sure that I was understanding that correctly.
Yeah, and I wouldn't call it a tax break. It's the ability to get out of a covenant that they entered into with only a penalty on the portion of the solar panel, and then they would thus be allowed to remain in the covenant on the remaining land. And any other landowner for any other purpose would break the covenant and owe taxes on the entire acreage of land that was put into the covenant.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if there's anybody that I don't know if there were some folks that may have wanted to speak on the bill, but
Chairman Corbett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Knight.
Yes.
Question. Has there ever been a study done to show the advantage of if you put 1,000 acres in solar, the reduction in CO2 versus if you'd left that 1,000 acres in trees and the reduction, producing air, taking CO2 out of the air, if it had been left in trees, the difference in the two? Has there ever been a study to show the value in that? Do you know?
Chairman Corbett, to my knowledge, so far there has not been one that I'm aware of. And I think that may be, I appreciate you bringing that up, but I think that's a discussion that we're, as we look around the nation and this issue of the solar panels and what is the good and bad, the actual policy decisions of it, what are the effects. I think that's something that may be forthcoming as we look, ahead. So that's a great question, but no, right now I don't know of a study that has been done that would give us that data. And again, but I'll revert back. This is not about those issues. This is about the simple principle of making sure that we keep those who enter into the covenant in parity, and that we treat everyone, the same up under the covenant.
Chairman Williamson.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 points, just to sort of clarify what Chairman Noel Williams asked earlier. Section 2 said, line 25, this act shall become effective on January 21st, 2024. So that speaks to the forward-looking nature of this measure. I do support this, and it's my understanding to Chairman Corbett's question that I believe even the Georgia Forestry Association supports this measure to get back to the historical true purpose of the conservation use valuation agreements that was put in years ago to help protect the natural resources and land of Georgia. Otherwise, in this rush we're installing solar farms all over Georgia, which is fine, but the developers are getting in front of these things, trying to figure out where they might be, putting the land in CUVA, doing dramatically lower ad valorem property taxes, and there's no penalty whenever the deal comes through. it's just extra money in their pockets, and it's still, at the end of the day, I believe, isn't it true? I believe that the chairman's remarks are dead on point, that this puts us back into the original intended purpose of CUVA when this legislature passed this legislation years ago. Isn't that true?
I believe the chairman, yes, I believe what he's saying is absolutely correct.
Chairman Newton, hit your button again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does this mean that, for example, out of 1,000 acres that's protected under CUVA and protected dramatically lower property taxes, even if there's something like 100 acres going to affordable housing or something, any issue like that, where it's the whole CUVA, entire 1,000 acres, isn't that, and isn't like Chairman Williamson mentioned, to protect the integrity of the goal of green space and conservation.
Conservation. Yes, your Chairman Newton, you're exactly right. Say 1,000 acre landowner sold 100 acres for housing or a development, then the entire covenant on that 1,000 acres would be broken, and that landowner would then thus be responsible for penalty, interest on the entire 1,000 acres. However, if the special exception would allow that same landowner to put in solar panels, same amount of land, and only be responsible for the penalties on that 100 acres, and thus keep the remaining 900 acres in the covenant. So again, it's parity. This is not about the underlying issue. It's about making sure that we keep the integrity of CUVA up for its original purpose, which was to make sure that landowners who were timber, farming, ag, wetlands, other of the approved conservation uses could keep that land and keep it without being taxed to death, if you will, at higher property tax rates, because that land was not used for development. And so that's the original intent of CUVA. We just want to make sure that we want to make sure that the integrity of that original bill is there. So
I think we pretty much are getting there, and we're pushed for time. Chairman Washburn, you're next, and I think we'll make this the last one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not on this subcommittee. Is it inappropriate
No,
for me
sir.
to come in?
Please.
I just think this is excellent legislation, and I appreciate the chairman bringing it. I think it's great legislation, very fair, and it's needed to be done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Since you have the microphone, we're in the form of accepting a motion one way or another. We have a motion do pass. We have tons of seconds. Is there the will of the body? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The bill passes on to the full committee.
Thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you. We have one more bill this year in all of the subcommittees. We're going to House Bill 101. Mr. Crow, you have the microphone.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for clarification, we are working off of LC 432770S. So hopefully
You may need to refresh to get the latest version.
I think we may have some paper copies, David, if we have some paper copies if we needed some. Patty, you got one? Yes, I have. Okay. All right, this LC 432770S is a substitute to House Bill 101. Contains a couple different provisions. Part 1 deals with the rural hospital tax credit, the Georgia Heart Program. It changes, it expands a little bit of the definitions of a rural hospital organization and its location. The primary change in here, though, is going to be in Section 1-2. We're going to change the limit for pass-through entities, subchapter S corporations, partnerships, and limited liability companies from $10,000 to a $25,000. And the aggregate amount of tax credits are going to go from $75 million a year to $80 million a year. And then it's also going to allow for, on line 87, it's going to allow for if a donor desires to make a contribution to a hospital that has exceeded its amount or would cause it to exceed its maximum amount of contributions, it's going to allow them to take the portion of that that they have remaining for that hospital, and then the rest of that will be sent to the next hospital that has the highest financial need, which is already in the code in paragraph D down on 93. So that changes there, and then there is a sunset. The sunset is extended to December 31st of 2028. Part 2 deals with the student scholarship organizations. It's going to go from $120 million per year to a $130 million a year aggregate cap. That's the only change in that. Part 3 is going to add a credit for qualified mortgage loan originators, which is a Georgia nonprofit company, essentially Habitat for Humanity and any other entities like that that provide housing to low cost or non-interest paid housing to Georgia citizens. It's going to have a single individual or head of household cap at $5,000 per year, or the actual amount of their contributions. A married couple filing jointly will be capped at up to $10,000 per year, and then qualified entities, pass-through entities, are going to be $10,000 a year. It's going to have a $10,000 aggregate cap and a $2 million per organization cap. So there'll be $10 million aggregate, $2 million per each Habitat association in Georgia. And then lastly is part 4. We have the PEACH program, which is a grants to public schools, and that amount is being changed from an aggregate amount of $5 million a year to $10 million per year, and has a sunset extended to December 31st, 2028. And that is essentially all the parts of the bill, Mr. Chairman. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Members, Chairman Blackman.
I was just going to say that I don't believe that the PEACH program has been fully subscribed. I could be wrong, but I think the 5 million to 10 was an error and has not been asked for. However, it'd be up to the will of the subcommittee as to what we do with that. They have asked for an extension to their sunset, and so we have included that in this bill. But thank you for a great job explaining it, Representative Crow. At proper time, I would make a motion to pass.
We have another question. Who's number 19? All right.
I'll just do that. If you accept that motion, I'll just do it under discussion. If
okay,
you'd like, just under discussion. I would just going forward as this bill moves.
Before we could do that, we have let's do the motion, then we'll come back to discussion. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of moving the bill forward, now we'll go to discussion.
Okay, there you go. So just under the purpose, I'm with Chairman Parsons now. It's Friday, and I was just looking. We moved on the rural hospital credit. We moved for LLCs. We moved that from 10 to 25,000.
Yes, sir.
All of the other credits stayed at 10,000. Just as we move forward, I'd like to know why there's a disparity there, and just I'll trust the author to get back with me.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I believe we have an amendment to be offered at this point.
I would move that we strike through on the. I don't have the line in front of me, to be honest with you. Blake, do you have the line of that?
For the 10 million increase for the PEACH program?
We would just revert the 10 million back to 5 million, since it has not been, I think, fully subscribed.
346.
Line 346, please. You need the 5 million.
No, they need the sunset.
And you need to extend the sunset, yes, sir.
We have an amendment in front of you. Is there discussion on the amendment? In that case, I'll accept a motion on the amendment. We have a motion. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. All those opposed. We are now in a posture of voting on a substitute to the bill. So do I hear a motion? Or we already have one. Yes, sir.
As amended.
Point of,
Just to be clear on what we just amended, is it not true that we're voting on line 346? We're saying line 346 section exceed 5 million per year. So we're deleting the 10 and going back to the original 5 million per year. Is that not true?
that is correct.
Okay, just want to make that clear for the record. Thank you.
So now we have a substitute. We're going to be voting on a substitute to the bill as amended. And we have a motion already on the table. So all those in favor of the amended substitute will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the bill have one no. The bill passes on to the full committee. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, this being the last bill of all of the subcommittees today, I want to take the chairman's prerogative to thank the chairman of the committee and the chairman of the subcommittee for probably one of the toughest years that we've had on the Ways and Means, hardest working, and to give our chairman a round of applause if we can. Ladies and gentlemen, the subcommittee is now adjourned.
We'll take a brief recess and start full here in just a few minutes. Thank you. Before everybody kind of gets tired of meeting and runs on out of here, I think we'll go ahead and call the full Ways and Means Committee meeting to order. And Chairman Williams has agreed to open us up with a word of prayer, please. Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for all your many blessings of life. We thank you for this great state of Georgia, and we thank you for this committee and the decisions that are made. We ask you to be with us, lead us, guide us, and give us wisdom. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
And I don't know if Chairman Stevens came back in here, but I greatly appreciate the kind words, and undeserving, of course, because the committee's only as good as the people that are on it. And I think we've got some of the hardest working committee members in this General Assembly, and maybe any General Assembly anywhere. And I just appreciate all that y'all do, the subcommittee chairs, all the members, and it has been an interesting, fun-filled year. But I appreciate the work that everybody's doing. I know we're trying to get some of these bills loaded up. I also want to make a couple of quick announcements while everybody's still here. We have one bill that will be a hearing only at the end today. Just wanted to let everybody know that in case you had somewhere else you just absolutely had to be. And there will be some hearings on some measures after crossover, even though they may not get a vote this particular year. We'll also be looking at a couple of task force to address some things and take a look at some things that will be of maybe benefit come next session. So just keep to a little bit of information there, and I think with that we can move on to our agenda items. I see. We'll start in. Yes, we did. No, HB 101. Vice Chairman Crow just presented this bill, but it's the first in the number LC 432770S. And we can be here as long or as short a time as y'all like. So brevity is helpful, but certainly don't want to shortchange anyone. Representative Crow.
Trying to get that to come up here on my, I'll just use the version that was in here in the earlier committee. As I stated, this is essentially a four-part bill, substitute to House Bill 101, dealing with the rural hospital tax credit, amending some definitions, and the biggest part of it is going to be changing the amount. The amount for a pass-through entity is going to be capped at $25,000. Up from 10, and the aggregate is going to be $80 million, up from 75, and it's also going to allow for partial proportional amounts. If somebody wants to give to a hospital organization that would cause it to exceed its maximum contributions for the year, they can then do the rest, the amount up to the amount that hospital can take, and then the rest of their full contribution will be given to the next hospital of highest financial need, as accounted for in paragraph D on line 93. The second part deals with the student scholarship organizations. That aggregate cap on that is going from $120 million to $130 million per year. Part 3 is dealing with qualified mortgage loan originators, organizations like Habitat for Humanity, to allow for contributions to those. It'll be a $5,000 up to $5,000 for an individual head or household, $10,000 for married couple filing joint returns, or $10,000 for a pass-through entity, and it will be a $10 million aggregate cap with $2 million in contributions to any one organization. That has a sunset of December 31st, 2028, as does the rural hospital tax credit. And then lastly, we are extending the sunset on the PEACH program, the grants to public schools. That is extending the sunset to December 31st, 2028, Mr. Chairman.
I had 15 and 19, and I think they both wanted to make a motion. So y'all Either one of you is perfectly welcome to do so.
Do pass.
And we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by stating aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Bill passes. Going to move on to House Bill 170. Chairman Carpenter.
All right, folks, House Bill 170 is the digital download tax that we've talked about over the last few years. Basically isolates it to items that you own when you purchase them online. So it's books that you can access at any time, video games, etc. It is not things that are subscription based. It is only actually things you own. It brings us into parity with how we tax brick and mortar stores. And I look forward to your favorable consideration.
We have a motion and a second, and discussion item.
Yes, sir. I chaired your subcommittee on sales tax, and just the question was brought up about where would the money go, the situs of the tax. So revenue has the ability to do that. There's a scale or a list they go down as to where they do it. So they can handle it. They'll get the revenue in the right place.
Thank you, Chairman. So postures, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by stating aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Bill passes on to rules. Next on the agenda, I believe, is House Bill 223. Chairman Stevens. What number?
18.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, House Bill 223 does one simple thing. It requires whenever you change a destination marketing organization for the purpose of handling hotel motel tax, that you go before the Performance Review Board, which is already set up in DCA, and it has an added advantage of keeping some of us out of trouble.
The motion do pass in a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by stating aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Moves on to rules. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next bill is Representative Camp, House Bill 283.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 283, LC 2768S, actually provides for a tax credit for first-time home buyers under $250,000 of 1.2%. The second part of the bill provides parity between how stick-built homes are taxed on materials only and how manufactured homes will now be taxed basically on materials only. This way to create some parity between how the taxation exists.
Okay, you have a question?
Just motion to pass at the proper time.
Okay, Chairman Corbett has a motion to pass. I hear a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by stating aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. The bill passes. Thank you very much, Representative Camp. Next is House Bill 449, Chairman Knight. What number are you?
14. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 449 is dealing with the CUVA tax code, in which we just heard. All it is doing is making sure that the landowners who enter into the covenant are treated fairly upon any breach of the covenant, and that the penalties are treated equally, no matter what the violation or breach of the covenant is. And we want to make sure we protect the integrity of CUVA and its original purpose.
We have a motion to pass, and we have a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Bill passes on to rules. All right, so next bill is House Bill 454. Includes three portions. One that updates the definition of force majeure. We also decouple regarding some depreciation under the IRS code, and then we clean up and phase in the standard deduction for our income tax code. Be happy to try to answer any questions. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by stating aye. Those opposed, like sign. Passes on. Moving along, we have a hearing only. Am I missing any of those bills? We have any? I know we loaded these up late. I want to make sure we don't miss anything. So we have a hearing only on a substitute. Oh, I'm sorry. House Bill 322. I missed that. Representative Scott's bill, which we have seen championed also by our former chairman, Brett Harrell. But what's the will of the committee on? I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by stating aye. Those opposed, like sign. All right, bill passes to rules. I think, again, we have a hearing on House Bill 146 that I think will turn into a task force, but anybody that we will not be voting on this bill today. So I just want to let anybody know in case you have other committees that you have to be at. I've asked Ryan Bowersox if he will try to speak to what we have on this substitute. It does pertain to the most and how we can try to address some of the needs of our cities across the state. So Ryan, if you want to have a seat and talk a little bit about what you have worked on here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleasure to be here before you all this morning, members of the committee. As the chairman alluded, this is a substitute to 146, which was a tightly constructed most previously, and the substitute I believe that you have in front of you is a little broader in concept. So I'd like to take you through just a little bit of a high-level overview and happy to accept any questions at any point during this. So the substitute in front of you, traditionally the most has been restricted due to the definition of municipality. This is the municipal option sales tax and has been used in the past for wastewater and sewer projects. Originally in the early 2000s, the most was put into state law, and it was defined to just include the city of Atlanta to allow them to levy this tax to upgrade their water and sewer systems, and it was restricted to a municipality that pumped 85 million gallons per day. A few years back, this was expanded to anyone connected into this wastewater system. The substitute in front of you today would include a new definition within this area of qualified municipality, which is tied to the qualified municipality definition of a SPLOST, opening it up to many more cities. The meat of the bill really comes in Section 2 in the structure of how this new most could be levied. It is restricted so that a city levying a most right now would not be able to utilize this new most unless near the end of the expiration they could make the transition. It would also be restricted. We have heard some of our concerns from our friends at ACCG and the counties of a most interfering with SPLOST referendums, and that is not our intent by any means to interfere with any countywide tax that may be levied and put in front of the voters. And so in the subsection A, paragraph 1B, actually has some restrictions surrounding how the potential new most could be levied. You would need to either follow a SPLOST referendum in the following 3 years, request a SPLOST and be denied by the county, or request a SPLOST and the county would have at that point 2 years to pursue a SPLOST before a city within the county, wholly or partially, could pursue the most. From there, there are two options in which the city could pursue the most, split into subparagraph B and subparagraph C. Very broadly, subparagraph B models the existing SPLOST, where subparagraph C models the existing LOST, and the revenue is designed to be used in the same manner. What is unique about this proposal is that for a city to implement this potential tax, a resolution would need to be passed and followed by a local act by the General Assembly. Similar to a hotel-motel tax, a local act would need to be passed by the local delegation, giving approval for their city to then levy the most. And following that local act, a referendum within the jurisdiction would then need to be held. So we have a couple steps to safeguard any potential city who is looking to implement this tax. They would need to pass the resolution, go to the members of their of the General Assembly, their local delegation, to have the local act passed, and then from there the question is put in front of the voters of a referendum. And again, the option would be for the most be levied in the jurisdiction as either modeling a SPLOST or modeling a LOST at that point. So I know that was a pretty high-level overview, but I'm happy to take any questions or any further explanation if the committee desires.
Are there any questions? I know that there was at least one person that asked to speak to this legislation. I don't see him at the moment. Somebody here from ACCG? Okay. Duck down. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate the overview on that. And Dante, you're fine wherever you're most comfortable. I know. Just change the mics there real quick. So please proceed, Dante.
Thank you, Chairman Blackman. My name is Dante Handel. I'm with ACCG, and I'd just like to express our concerns about expanding the MOST law. So ACCG believes that expanding MOST represents bad tax policy, so we're opposed to any authorization of a sales tax that applies to less than an entire area of a county, which the MOST would. Those scenarios can create unnecessary and counterproductive competition between sales tax initiatives, so citizens in a MOST city could be less likely to vote for other county-wide sales taxes, SPLOST, T-SPLOST, E-SPLOST, both due to a higher combined sales tax rate and because the benefits from those other taxes are spread throughout the county rather than concentrated in one city like the MOST would be. Having all local governments mutually benefiting from a sales tax prevents those conflicts and promotes a more collaborative approach to funding of public needs. Water and wastewater systems, unlike non-revenue generating services, should be operated as self-funding units. So costs, including capital improvements, are paid by revenue generated by the systems themselves rather than general tax revenues. And then in addition, those water and wastewater systems have multiple other funding sources not available to other types of services. These include low-interest financing through the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority or revenue bonds. And the Federal American Rescue Plan is providing more than $1.4 billion to Georgia cities, and water and wastewater infrastructure is a specifically authorized use of those funds. Now, neglecting proper maintenance and capital replacement can create short-term savings, but also creates large liabilities into the future, which might be effective to keep water rates low in the short term, but leads to higher rates later on. And expanding the MOST ends up creating an opportunity for the cities to have their cake and eat it too on this issue. So if we need another sales tax for water and sewer statewide, we should consider expanding SPLOST for that purpose. I need to make sure local governments with water and sewers are not siphoning money off of enterprise funds to subsidize their general funds, and they should be able to properly maintain those systems if set correctly. I'd urge y'all to keep in mind that we need to prioritize our sales tax for capital projects that do not have a user fee to fund them instead.
Very good. Well, I don't see any questions. We'll continue the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dante. Does anybody have anything further for the good of the order, or are y'all just ready to get the whatever out of here? All right. Meeting adjourned.